In this video, we will be talking about the last German Empress Auguste, wife of German Emperor and King of Prussia Wilhelm II. While her husband is infamous for his role in World War I, Auguste is mostly overseen, or notorious for being a conservative, love-blind housewife. We will explore her true life story, so grab a coffee, lean back, and let's dive into Empress Auguste's biography. The last German empress was born on the 22nd of October 1858 as Auguste Viktoria of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Augustenburg, as the oldest of 5 children. Her father Frederick of Schleswig-Holstein and mother Adelheid found themselves in exile when Auguste was born, since they lost their duchy first to Denmark and later on to Prussia. The family lived a peaceful life in Danzig, Prussia, where they found refuge. After the duchy was incorporated by Prussia, Auguste's father Frederick didn't have an important position anymore, so he went on to take charge of his children's education. The daughters were taught everything they needed to become supportive wives in the future, though no one thought at that time that Auguste would marry into a major royal family. Auguste was close to her loving father, while her deeply religious mother wasn't too invested in her daughter's life. The young duchess was of a quiet, sensitive nature. She loved riding horses and being outdoors, while she enjoyed her home life without strict ceremonial. From 1875 on, Auguste, who was mostly called Donna by her family, was sent to stay with family members all over Europe with the intention of refining her education. While staying at the court in London, she saw the young Prussian Prince Wilhelm again, whom she had met as a child during a holiday at Queen Victoria's summer residence in Germany. Even though they got along well, it wasn't love at first sight for Auguste and Wilhelm. Both had other love interests, but as their infatuations faded over the years, Wilhelm began frequenting Auguste's family home in Primkenau. Their affection for each other grew over time, which culminated in 1879 when Wilhelm proposed to Auguste, and she happily accepted. While the couple was over the moon, their engagement wasn't received well by those around them. Wilhelm's grandfather, the reigning German Emperor and King of Prussia, Wilhelm I, considered Auguste too low born, while his minister Bismarck called her the cow from Holstein. Even Prince Wilhelm's sister Charlotte tried to undermine the relationship, as she found Auguste quiet and boring. The only support came from Wilhelm's parents, Crown Prince Frederick and Crown Princess Victoria, who was hoping to find a confidant in the Protestant Auguste. Against all odds, and after convincing Emperor Wilhelm to give his blessing, the wedding date was set for the 27th of February. Auguste was officially welcomed in Berlin on the 26th, as she was riding in a carriage made from glass through the streets of Berlin, which were lined with cheering crowds. The next day, the wedding was held at the chapel in the castle of Berlin. Auguste left the guests in awe as she entered the venue dressed in a white silver brocade dress with a lace veil, which was a gift from Queen Victoria. On this day, the Primkenau girl from an insignificant family officially became the future German Empress and Queen of Prussia. From 1881 on, the couple resided in the Marmor Palais in Potsdam. Auguste settled in well into her new role as a housewife. She was beyond happy with Wilhelm and did everything to provide him a cozy home. Her husband became the center of her attention, even though Wilhelm was gone a lot of the time. Auguste avoided the court of Berlin, as she didn't feel comfortable with the social circle there that was revolving around her sister-in-law Charlotte. Charlotte avoided Auguste at all costs, whom she found upright and uncultivated. Even Auguste's husband Wilhelm, who appreciated the amenities she provided him with, found his wife to be uninspiring and noted that it was obvious she was raised in Primkenau, not in Windsor. This often left Auguste lonely and bored at their residence in Potsdam. She wasn't too interested in literature, science or politics, so she spent her time with handicrafts and riding out. In 1882, Auguste and Wilhelm welcomed their firstborn son, another Wilhelm. In total, they had 6 sons and 1 daughter together. Auguste flourished in her role as a mother. She put most of her time into the upbringing of her children and provided them a loving, caring home. Their oldest son Wilhelm wrote in his memoirs, that his mother was the center of their family life and that she was greatly loved by all of them, while his father wasn't present most of the time. At the age of 12, the Prussian princes were expected to leave their home to continue their education at the Plöner Cadet School. Devastated to part with her children, the ever-compliant housewife Auguste, who never contradicted or criticized her husband, dared to disagree with Wilhelm for the very first time. She cried, wept, and raged, but her husband's decision was irrevocable. While Wilhelm tried to upkeep the image of a devoted husband, he took on multiple mistresses after the first year of marriage. Whether Auguste knew of his constant infidelity is unknown, and Wilhelm tried to keep his affairs discreet. In the public eye, Auguste resembled the ideal mother and devoted housewife, and she was worshipped by the German people for it. Despite her popularity with the German people, her mother-in-law Viktoria was deeply disappointed in her. In the beginning, Auguste tried to mediate between Wilhelm and Viktoria, as the mother-son relationship was strained. Over time, she realized that Wilhelm was not willing to reconcile with his mother, so Auguste chose her husband's side and distanced herself from her liberal mother-in-law. Viktoria came to regret her support for the marriage between Auguste and her son, since Auguste was even more conservative than her son Wilhelm. In 1898, the life of Auguste and Wilhelm took a fateful turn. Emperor Wilhelm I died and was succeeded by his son Frederick III, but the newly crowned emperor died from cancer 99 days into his reign. This made Wilhelm and Auguste the new imperial couple of Germany. The unambitious Auguste was reluctant to leave her dear home life in Potsdam, but the couple had to move to Berlin. Despite the initial dislike of her new position, Auguste grew to enjoy the amenities that came with being an empress. She started to wear elegant clothes, loved expensive fare and perfumes, and enjoyed hosting lavish dinners. As the new empress and queen, Auguste took on many social projects. While she didn't position herself when it came to education for girls, she supported the needs of mothers and families. With her aid, the network of social institutions grew tremendously. Auguste was deeply religious and thus funded the building of new churches and Protestant charity work. Besides using state funds for charity, it is reported that Auguste often utilized money from her personal assets to help. She even visited families in need privately and assisted them with their needs. While she insisted to do so in private, some of her deeds became public anyway, which made Auguste even more popular. Auguste started to enjoy her role over the years, though the relationship with her husband became more distant. Emperor Wilhelm, who once enjoyed the cozy home life, now took every opportunity to flee the stifling atmosphere with Auguste. The empress suffered in silence and never complained, as she continued to sacrifice herself for Wilhelm. And her time to shine would come. In 1908, the famous Daily Telegraph scandal unfolded. Wilhelm had given them an interview in which he made thoughtless and indiscreet statements that infuriated both the English and German public. Wilhelm was devastated by the massive backlash and even thought about abdicating. Auguste had her husband's back and convinced him to put the blame for the interview on his minister von Bülow. After the initial uproar was resolved, Wilhelm was impressed by his wife's perseverance, and their relationship grew closer again. Over the years, the political situation in Europe grew more and more tense. Wilhelm II had failed to renew some peace treaties his father had formed. Besides, he upgraded his military forces greatly and demonstrated his empire's force everywhere. By now, Auguste took part in political questions, but she was biased by her unconditional patriotism and devotion to her husband. While her husband's saber-rattling left Europe at unease, Auguste supported Wilhelm no matter what, without considering the great consequences his demeanor could have. After years of arms race and underlying threats, World War I broke out in 1914. As a passionate patriot, Auguste called the German women to support the national efforts. She posed as an example to them by visiting lazarettes and by showing tireless commitment. But the war didn't go as planned for Germany. After great losses and the US joining the Allied forces, in 1918 the defeat was inevitable. The same year, Augustus suffered a stroke and Emperor Wilhelm was forced to abdicate and fled to the Netherlands, where he was granted refuge. Augustus soon joined him in Castle Amerongen. The Dutch public was enraged by the presence of the former German imperial couple, and the Allied forces prompted the Netherlands multiple times to extradite Wilhelm to be prosecuted. But the small state refused and stood strong, as their laws granted exile for political refugees at all costs. Their residence, Castle Amerongen, was owned by Count Bentinck, whose daughter recorded some memories of hosting the German couple at their family estate. She witnessed Augustus' deep devotion to her husband, while Wilhelm focused on himself and neglected her deteriorating health. In 1920, the couple moved to House Dawn, which Wilhelm had purchased earlier. While he had come to terms with his new bourgeois lifestyle, Augustus struggled greatly. She held on to court costumes while being deeply hurt in her pride. Augustus' health declined dramatically over the next months, as she suffered from multiple heart attacks and a stroke, which left her almost bedbound and speechless. The year 1920 was filled with even more tragedy, when her son Joachim died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The family decided to tell Augusta it was an accident, since they feared the shock over the true events would be too great. Augusta took the news with composure, but as they couldn't attend Joachim's funeral in Germany, she was devastated. Soon after, she suffered another stroke, which left her unconscious for most of the time. Her children took turns to stay by their beloved mother's bed, while Wilhelm was already planning her funeral. His intention was to reawaken the monarchical movement in Germany, but his children strongly opposed his plans. On April 11, 1921, Augusta died peacefully at the age of 62. 200,000 people would turn up for her funeral in Potsdam, where Augusta was laid to rest in the park of Castle Sanssouci. Undoubtedly, Augusta was a conservative woman without any ambition for power. She was admired for her warm demeanor, her charity work, and her unconditional devotion to her husband. Though Augusta was blind to Wilhelm's wrongdoings and lacked any kind of political finesse whatsoever, she gained great popularity with the German people and is remembered through many social institutions that carry her name to this day on.